Today I want to look at something that might be immediately familiar to some of you, to others not so much. When you hear dry bones, you might think, oh, that's a prophecy that's in Ezekiel. Some of you will think, that's Ezekiel 37. That's what I want to address. Charlie touched on the idea of the Gentiles coming into covenant. For me, it was this past Shabbat, depending on when this video gets voted to go up. It will be several Shabbats past for you. And I want to start by looking at something that he mentioned in that Torah portion. It was Torah portion Terumah, the idea of those who are afar off. Okay, so the Hebrew word for afar off is rachoch. Rachoch. It's this word here. And all that it means is something that is far away, literally something that is distant, something that's far, something that's remote. And it comes from this verb root, which is rachak. And that is a verb which means to be distant, or to be far away, or to put something far away. So that's the idea that we are dealing with. Those people who are distant from Yahovah. Those who are distant from him, as we will see, are the Gentile nations, or simply the Gentiles. Gentile meaning of other nations other than Israel. Of course, when we come to Yahovah, when we come to a knowledge of his word and we believe his word, we become Israel. We become a part of his people. We don't become a part of the land in the Middle East, because in his eyes, that is not what Israel is. In his eyes, Israel are those who are descendants of the man who he called Israel, and we are his descendants when we do the things that Israel did, when we are of Israel spiritually. So when we come to Yahovah, when we enter into covenant with him, as he was in covenant with Israel, we become one of Israel's children. Another word that we should be familiar with is the word machak. We can see that it is of the same verb root, which means to be far away. And this means a distant place, a far country rather. So these words literally mean something that is distant, and we'll see that can be distant in terms of spatially distant, and also distant in time. You can speak of let's say the millennial kingdom, and say that is rachok from where we are now. We see the word rachok used in Genesis 22. It says that Abraham saw the place where he was to offer his son from a distance in the English here, but in Hebrew it says he saw it Rachok, it was afar off from him. We also see it with Joseph's brothers. They saw Joseph Rachok from a distance. In Exodus 20, we see that the people stood at a distance from Mount Sinai. So the word Rachok means something that literally is far off from the perspective of the one using the verb. So when Yehovah uses the verb Rachok, he's talking about those people who are at a distance from him. And we can understand that spiritually, but it is used more often of a physical distance. So people who are far from his holy land, for example, would be those who are afar off. In Deuteronomy 13 verse 7, it says, "Of the gods of the people which are all around you, near to you or far off." So the concept of things being near or far is a very tangible concept. It's not that the house of Judah are those who are near and that the house of Israel are those who are far. That, as in, it's not as if those terms always refer to them. The house of Judah were near to him, and the house of Israel were scattered to places that were distant from him. But that doesn't mean that those phrases only refer to those two things. Deuteronomy 28:49 says, "Yehovah brings a nation against you from Rachok," from a distant place, from somewhere that is far off. So when people say that the house of Israel are afar off, that's right. The nation that was brought against them and took them was actually Assyria, which would have been afar off. But they are scattered in places now that are far off. All the lands are far off, in fact. And Yehovah says that he will bring a nation from one of those lands to punish Israel. And that's what we see with the house of Israel, that they were scattered into the nations, those nations that were Rachok, but that would be all nations. If the people round about them could be described as near or far off, then we can see that it doesn't have to be the nations as far-flung as they are now to qualify as being Rachok. They could be quite near to the people, but still be far off from them in the terms that the scriptures use. In 1 Kings 8, Solomon prays, "When they sin against you, for there is no one who does not sin, and you become enraged with them and give them to the enemy, and they take them captive to the land of the enemy, far or near." So if we remember that the house of Judah was taken into Babylon, maybe that qualifies as nearby, but these terms aren't terms that are used of the house of Judah and the house of Israel exclusively. These nations that Solomon is praying about, he's using these terms just of distance, and that's how they are used in the scriptures. They aren't special terms. and they shall turn back unto their heart in the land where they have been taken captive, and shall turn and make supplication to you in the land who took them captive. So those nations who are afar off, take them captive, take them into their land, and then they turn their hearts to Yehovah. Now we're going to see it wasn't the people who were taken captive who turned back to Yehovah. I'm sure some of them did. I'm sure some of them saw what had happened to them, realized it was because of their wickedness, and they turned back to Yehovah. I'm sure that happened. But the people who ultimately will turn to him are a future people. So his people, the house of Israel, were scattered into the nations, and they have become Gentiles. They've interbred with the Gentiles, and they have produced offspring who are Gentiles. So when we speak of the house of Israel among the nations, we're not talking about a people group among the nations. We're talking about those who would do what he says, those who would walk in covenant with Yehovah, those who are Israel in his eyes. When he says, I'll make a new covenant with the house of Judah, with the house of Israel, Judah were never scattered into the nations. They were taken into Babylon for 70 years, and then they came back to the land. That's why we think of the people who live in the land as Jews. That's short for Judah. The house of Israel were scattered, and when he says that he will gather the house of Israel back, it doesn't mean that he's going to gather like lineages or genealogies back. It means that he's going to gather those people who are Israel among the nations. So all Gentiles who turn to him will become the house of Israel, or are the house of Israel, because he foreknew them. He chose them from the beginning to be Israel, to be his chosen. So we'll see from Romans 11 that Israel's fall and their scattering among the nations was for the benefit, or was to the benefit of the Gentiles. Yehovah uses all things for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So their fall was used for good. It is riches to the Gentiles, Paul says. But he will not only call those people whom he foreknew his chosen, he also calls the house of Judah, who are the people who are currently living in the land of Israel. Those of them who are chosen, not all of them. He's not going to call all of the Jews back. He's going to call those who are Israel. Just like he calls people from among the nations who are Israel, according to his foreknowledge. He knows those who are Gentiles, who are actually Israel, ultimately, and he knows those who follow Judaism and live in the land of Israel at the moment. He knows the ones from among them who are going to come and be his people in the new covenant. In Esther, we see Mordecai writing letters to all the Jews who were in all the provinces, those who were near and those who were rachok. So this is only talking about Jews here, and it refers to them as those who are near and those who are far, simply because these terms refer to physical distance, just as they do everywhere else. The people who are afar off are the Gentiles who will come into covenant with Yehovah and who ultimately will comprise the tribes of Israel, who ultimately will be part of Ephraim, part of the house of Israel, part of the 10 northern tribes, not by lineage, simply because of their obedience and their heart being given to Yehovah to do his word. Psalm 10 verse 1 says, "Why do you stand afar off, rachok?" So it is used here of Yehovah, the psalmist inquiring, "Why are you distant from us?" So this is another way in which this can be understood. You can talk of those who are near to Yehovah as those who are walking in his ways, who know him, and those who are far off from him as those who do not know him, are not in covenant with him. In Psalm 22 verse 1 it says, my ale, why have you forsaken me, far from saving me?" And that's the word again. We can see it here used in terms of Yehovah being distant. In 2 Kings 19, it says, "Have you not heard long ago," the English says, but the Hebrew says, "Have you not heard rachok?" Because it's talking about something which is distant. It is talking about time. So the translators have translated it as long ago, but the word is rachok. So you're saying that the different ways that it can be used of a place that is distant, it can be used of a distant time, and it can be when Yehovah is distant from us. 1 Chronicles 17:16-17, we see the term used again of time. King David came in and sat before Yehovah, and we see it says he was praying to Yehovah. He says, "It was a small matter in your eyes, O Elohim, but you have spoken of your servant's house, rachok." So what he is saying is, you have spoken of your servant's house at a distance. And obviously, it's not talking about you've spoken of your servant's house. In Iceland, it's talking about what is actually said about the house of King David, that it will endure into the future. So we can see that the term rachok doesn't only imply distance physically, spatially, but also temporally, in terms of time. Isaiah 33, 12-13 says, "And people shall be like the burning of lime, like thorns cut up, they are burned in the fire. You who are far off, you who are rachok, hear what I shall do, and you who are near, know my might." So here we see that Yehovah makes prophecy. He makes it not only to those who know him, who are near to him, but also to those who are distant from him. It says that the Gentiles will know that he is Yehovah, Yehovah being him who is outside of time, he who was, who is, and is to come. You'll notice when that statement is made, you will know that I'm Yehovah. It concerns him fulfilling some element of prophecy, be it the giving of the land to Israel, or be it some other prophecy that he's made. And he says, in that day, they will know that I'm Yehovah, when the things that I have prophesied come to pass. Isaiah 57:19 says, creating the fruit of the lips, peace, peace to him who is far off and to him who is near. So Yehovah here promises his shalom to the Gentiles, essentially here, to those who know him and to those who don't know him, would be another way of interpreting this. But we see many prophecies in Scripture which talk of him extending his hand to the Gentile nations. Isaiah 66 verse 19 says, and I shall set a sign among them, and shall send some of those who escape to the nations, Tarshish and Pool and Lud, who draw the bow, and Tuval and Yavan, the coastlines are far off. So all of these places are mentioned as being afar off from him in terms of distance. He speaks of the nations here. The term Gentiles isn't actually scriptural. In Scripture, we see the Goyim, Hagoyim in Hebrew, or he might speak of the peoples, Ha'amim, Amim being the plural of Am, which is people. So he either speaks of the peoples or the Goyim. Gentiles is kind of an English word which is inserted sometimes inappropriately. Sometimes it's just for Goyim. Sometimes in Greek it's for ethnos. But it's just speaking of the other nations in the world. So he says some of them will escape to the nations, and indeed they did. But when his people are scattered or escape, the punishment they brings, they go into the nations. It's not those people that he has promised to bring back, but he does promise to bring back the house of Israel. And as I say, they will be constituted of Gentiles who are then the house of Israel, who begin to walk in his ways, begin to be Israel. So there is no defined house of Israel which is in the nations. Sometimes you'll get like the idea of like British Israelis, or the black Hebrew Israelites, people who think that they are actually genetically descended from Israel, and none of that is actually scriptural. Israel are known by their works and their belief, more importantly their belief, the fact that they enter into covenant with Yehovah. That's what makes people of the house of Israel. Now, the house of Judah, they were never divorced. They were never scattered. They are disobedient to the word, and they will come and be a part of his people. Not all of them. The ones whom he foreknew will be a part of his people, just like the Gentiles whom he foreknew will be a part of the house of Israel. He says that he makes his new covenant with the house of Judah and the house of Israel. He doesn't say he makes it with the Gentiles, because he doesn't. It's not all of the Gentiles. It's those whom he foreknew among them. It's not all of Judah. It's those whom he foreknew among them. And they will comprise Israel in his sight, those who are obedient to the word. And they will be the tribes of Israel in the millennial kingdom. We see in Deuteronomy 33 verse 17, it says, he pushes the peoples to the end of the earth, the peoples being those people who are not of the people Israel, the nations, the Gentiles. And they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are the thousands of Manasseh. So when we see 10,000s or thousands, it's talking about multitudes. It's talking about a great number of people. Basically what this is saying is the nations will make up the tribes of Israel. They are the myriads of Ephraim. They are the myriads of Manasseh. They are two of the tribes in the house of Israel. So the house of Israel will be comprised of those whom he foreknew, those whom he chose, his elect, if you want to use that term, from among the nations. Isaiah 43, 5-8 says, do not fear, for I am with you. I shall bring your seed from the east and gather you from the west. I shall say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from, there's that term again, the ends of the earth. All those who are called by my name, whom I have created, formed, even made for my esteem. He shall bring out blind people who have eyes, and deaf ones who have ears. So they are the people that comprise Jacob. He is addressing Jacob here. When we say Jacob, we mean the man, Jacob, his descendants. Jacob, of course, is the man whom Yehovah gave the name Israel. So these people, when it says, I will bring your seed from afar, doesn't mean those people who are actually genetically descended from Jacob. It's talking like in the same way that it says that we are all sons of Abraham if we have faith in Messiah in Galatians 3:29. These people will be brought from all over the earth. The people that he knows will obey his voice, the people who will enter into covenant with him and will keep covenant with him, as he identifies them here, those who are called by my name. Those who are called by his name are those whom he foreknew from right from the beginning. It is a shame that man had to go on this little detour away from what God had planned for them originally by going into disobedience. Even his people who he freed from the land of Egypt, even they went astray from what he had promised to them. So we had to go on this little detour. All the bad things that we see in the world, all of that needed to come to pass in order for an obedient and humble people to come to be. And they are the people that he makes covenant with. Psalm 65, 4-5, not 54, says, "Blessed is the one you choose, and bring near to dwell in your courts. We are satisfied with the goodness of your house, your holy or set-apart temple. By awesome deeds in righteousness you answer us, O Elohim of our deliverance, the trust of all the ends of the earth and the Rachok seas." So all of those people who are far off from him, he is their trust. Also, as in, ultimately he will be the thing upon which they rely. The house of Israel, who are scattered among the nations, whom he is going to regather, he is their trust. So, when we think of the house of Israel, we need to think, well, we are the house of Israel. And we need to reckon, how are we the house of Israel? We are the house of Israel by faith. See, people have all sorts of ideas about what Israel is and how you can be a part of Israel, but the only person that it matters what they're reckoning of what Israel is Yehovah. Doesn't matter what the Zionists think Israel is. Doesn't matter what the British Israelites think Israel is. Doesn't matter what any men say that it is. What matters is what Yehovah says. And he identifies Israel as those who obey his voice, those who Shema. They are the people who have the law written on their inward parts, that he will make covenant with. And we have the opportunity to be the house of Israel. And there is a promise contained within this verse, which is very great and is part of this prophecy that Yehovah will come to the Gentiles. And it's all to do with bringing them near to Yehovah, to dwell in his courts, and to be satisfied with the goodness of his house, his holy temple. We are invited, in fact, to be a part of his holy temple. Romans 10:18-21 says, "But I asked, did they not hear? Yea, indeed, their voice went out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. But I ask, did Israel not know? First Moshe says, I shall provoke you to jealousy by those who are not a nation. I shall enrage you by an unwise nation. And Isaiah boldly says, I was found by those not seeking me. I was made manifest to those not asking for me. To Israel he says, all day long I have stretched out my hands to a disobedient and back-talking people. So, to Israel, those who are naturally Israelites, those who are the physical seed of the man Israel, to them he he sent prophets and he asked them to return to covenant with him, but they would not have any of it. So he says, okay, I'm going to make you jealous by those people who are not a nation, as it says in Hosea. The Gentiles are used by him. After he scatters the house of Israel into the Gentiles are then used to make those that remain of the natural seed of Israel, to make them jealous by presumably their love for the one whom the natural branches, as we will see them called, would call their God, Yehovah. In Romans 11, 1-2, it says, and then, has Elohim rejected his people? Let it not be. I also am a Israelite of the seed of Abraham, of the tribe of Benjamin. Elohim has not rejected his people whom he knew beforehand. And that is the important thing. So we see that God has not rejected his people. That's not the end of the statement. He's not rejected his people whom he knew beforehand. Okay, he's not rejected the chosen out of his people. It didn't come as any kind of surprise to him that his people would not hearken to his voice. He knew how everything would have to play out. He knew those among his people, the natural branches, those whom he would choose. And he uses the Gentiles who choose him to make those of his people who he foreknew, to make them jealous. As we go on in Romans 11, it says, I say then, have they stumbled that they should fall? Let it not be, but by their fall, deliverance or salvation has come to the Gentiles to provoke them to jealousy. Okay, so it posits the question, did Israel fall just for the sake of them falling? Paul says, let it not be. By them falling, salvation came to the Gentiles, because he scattered the house of Israel among the Gentiles, and this is of great benefit to the Gentiles, because now they have access to Yehovah and to his ways. They have a means by which they can come into covenant with Yehovah. If their fall is riches for the world, and their failure riches for the Gentiles, how much more their completeness? For I speak to you, the Gentiles, as much inasmuch as I am apostle to the Gentiles, I esteem my service. If somehow I might provoke to jealousy those who are my flesh, and save some of them, for if their casting away is the restoration to favour of the world, what is their acceptance but life from the dead? So Paul delineates here those who are of his flesh, those who are natural born Israelites, from the Gentiles who will come in and be a part of Israel. And he says, if the casting away of the natural branches was to the benefit of the world, how much more benefit will it be when they come back in and are part of Israel? They may be following whatever nonsense they're following at the moment, but he knows those among the house of Judah who are his, the ones whom he has chosen. It says, now if the first fruit is holy or set apart, the lump is also, and if the root is holy or set apart, so are the branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you, being a wild olive tree, have been grafted in among them, and came to share the root and fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. And if you boast, remember, you do not bear the root, but the root bears you. So the natural branches are those who are the physical descendants of Jacob or Israel. And some of them were broken off and cast off, and that was to the benefit of the Gentiles, to our benefit. But if some of them were broken off, and we were like a wild tree that was grafted into the olive tree being Israel. Okay, we're back on a new day. Last time when I recorded the first half of this, I'd spent all of the morning talking to Jehovah's Witnesses about what the scriptures say. So I was pretty tired, but this is a new day now. This is weeks later. Ashley's back in the country, so she's able to do the cameras and do the video from here live instead of doing it remotely, which she was doing last time. So we'll pick up where we were, and we were considering Paul's admonition not to boast against the natural branches who are Israel according to the flesh. And Paul's made the point, look, I am an Israelite. I'm of the tribe of Benjamin. So he's talking about the natural branches being those who are descended from Israel, the man, his descendants, some of whom were still in the land. We know Yehovah divorced the house of Israel, which was 10 of the tribes, but Benjamin and Judah make up the house of Judah, and they were not divorced. Jeremiah 3:8 tells us that he divorced the 10 northern tribes, but we don't have any record of him divorcing Judah. The closest thing that we have is we know historically that the temple was destroyed by the Romans, and we know from the scriptures that Yehovah brings conquerors on his people, and we know that the house of Judah were perhaps not removed from the land, but they were conquered, and they went out into all of the lands of the earth, where they met with persecution of various types. It didn't go well for Judah, but we don't have any record that they were divorced. We associate Jews with the land of Israel now, and a Jew, that name comes from house of Judah. So you can be of the house of Judah, can be a Jew, biblically speaking, but you might not follow Judaism. So we've got two different ideas of what it is to be a Jew. A Jew, the religion, Judaism, is not necessarily what you would be talking about if you said that you were a Jew. Of course, Yeshua was a Jew, but he didn't follow Judaism. He didn't follow all of the oral Torah, the halachot that Judaism teaches and follows. But it tells us here to be careful against boasting against the natural branches. We've kind of been grafted into Israel. We've been brought into Israel by Yehovah's grace, but we're not to then think, well, we are Israel, so the original people were not important to Yehovah. He didn't waste his time with the actual physical descendants of Israel, only to just throw all of that away and start again with the Gentiles. Rather, through the fall of Israel, benefit has been brought to the Gentiles. They were scattered amongst them. They became Gentiles once they are divorced and they are scattered amongst the nations. Then the house of Israel, in that form, genetic form that is, ceased to be, because once you're scattered amongst the people group, then you interbreed with that people group, and any kind of idea of a genetic lineage is lost. I see a lot of kind of false ideas around lineage that people have. We've commented before that spiritual deception often takes the form of being in some way persuaded that you are special over other people. We see, people who, without naming names, people who have started to have a large audience peddling kind of pseudo-spiritual ideas. They have gotten a large audience, and something I've noticed is that they are in some way persuaded that they are the Messiah, or there's some kind of thing which they've been persuaded that they are special in some way. We've had people who have come here who have some kind of idea that that some prophecy or other is about them, and they get led astray into various false teaching, believing that they're special in some way. People believing that they are now priests in the order of Melchizedek, or that they are of a particular lineage or genealogy, that they are Levites in the flesh, that they are descended from Aaron, or that they are of the line of King David in some way. All of it just completely misses the point and is actually dangerous, because it convinces people that they are special because of their bloodline, as opposed to because of Yehovah's grace in bringing the nations to be a part of Israel. If they are willing to, if they take his covenant upon themselves, and it just tends to cause people to think that they're something special. And if you think that you're something special because of your bloodline, then you are easier to deceive into false doctrine about that thing. Well, if you are one of these people, then it means this and it means that. completely misses the point of what Yahovah is doing. There are people who are descended from Israel. They're the natural branches. But what Paul is getting across here is it is about choice. It's the elect. It's those whom Yahovah chooses. Their bloodline isn't what makes them Israel. The fact that they are descended from the man Israel just shows that Yahovah is going to do what he promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that their descendants would be important in some way. But amongst them, it's not everyone who is a natural branch. It is those who follow Yahovah, those who are Israel spiritually. So you're going to have Israel, those who are descended from the man Israel, and of them Yahovah chooses those who will Shema, those who will heed his voice and obey. And of the Gentiles, he will choose those also who will be his elect. And both of them together will be Israel. But don't be fooled by kind of these ideas of British Israelites or the black Hebrew Israelites or any of these things that appeal to the flesh rather than appeal to the spirit. Israel are those who enter into covenant with Yahovah and do his will, those who submit to Yahovah. It's not about your lineage. If you happen to be of the lineage of the house of Judah, then you still need to be submitted to Yahovah in order for him to see you as Israel. Your genetics are not enough. They're in fact entirely irrelevant. Paul tells Titus in the third chapter, what we've made the third chapter of his letter to him, that discussions about genealogies are without profit and vain in their nature. So we are grafted into Israel by our faith because we are the chosen, but we should not forget, or we should not boast against the natural branches whom Yahovah will sift, and he will bring those who are actually Israel in the same way. He will bring them into the covenant with himself. But we shouldn't get high-minded and think, well, actually, it doesn't matter now. It doesn't matter. The house of Judah have been cast off, or the house of Israel have been cast off. That's irrelevant. They were the natural tree before Yahovah extended his grace to us. So we shouldn't get high-minded and boast against them. As Paul says here, you do not bear the root, but the root bears you. It's their existence in the first place which has allowed for us to be grafted into the tree. In Acts 13:46-47 it says, "And on the next Sabbath almost all the city came together to hear the word of Elohim. But when the Jews saw the crowds, they were filled with jealousy." This is what Paul was talking about. "And contradicting and speaking evil, they opposed what Paul was saying. But speaking boldly, Shaul and Barnabas said it was necessary that the word of Elohim should be spoken to you first. But since you thrust it away and judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life, see, we turn to the Gentiles. For so the Master has commanded us, I have set you to be a light to the Gentiles, that you should be for deliverance or salvation, same word, to the ends of the earth. So what we see here is, just as Paul is writing of to the Romans, that the Gentiles turning to Yehovah was to make the natural branches, the house of Judah, to make them jealous. And here we see that they're made jealous when they see the big crowds of Gentiles who have turned to Yehovah. So they play a role, natural Israel play a role, in that they are a light to the Gentiles. That's how Yehovah uses them. Their existence, they are the root from which Yeshua was born. Then existence was necessary in order for the Gentiles to be able to know of and learn of Yehovah. And then when the Gentiles come to Yehovah, it makes the house of Judah jealous. And eventually they will come back to Yehovah as well. But it's among the Gentiles and among the house of Judah, it is those who are chosen, those whom Elohim knew beforehand, those that will pay heed to what Elohim says. It's not about genetics, though, neither for the Gentiles or for the house of Judah. It's all according to the will and the grace of God, that the people who will be Israel will be Israel in the end. He chooses those who will bow the knee to him, who will submit to him. Jeremiah 25 verse 9 says, See, I am sending and taking all the tribes of the north, declares Yehovah, and Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon my servant, and shall bring them against this land and against its inhabitants, and against these nations all around, and shall put them under the ban, and make them an astonishment, and hissing, and everlasting ruins. So this is how Yehovah, how he took the house of Israel and scattered them amongst the nations. He used a foreign adversary, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and says all the tribes of the north. We read of Yehovah gathering his people back from the north and the south and the east and the west. These are the people that we were looking at, those who are far off. So you will often read of things like this. The north came and took the children of Israel. In fact, Jeremiah is prophesying to the house of Judah in this instance. And they were taken into Babylon, and they stayed in Babylon for 70 years, and then they were returned to the land. With the house of Israel, it was slightly different. They were taken by people of the north, namely the Assyrians, and they were taken into captivity, and they never returned to the land again. Yehovah divorced the house of Israel. But each of them were taken by the tribes of the north. Don't get confused with references to the north. The 10 tribes that make up the house of Israel are often called the northern tribes, because they were in the north of the land of Israel. But those who come from the north to take both the house of Israel and the house of Judah into captivity, it's just a way of referring to people other than Israel. So they were taken into captivity, and you can read about that in the book of Daniel. You can read about them being freed from captivity in Babylon in the books of Nehemiah and Ezra. You can read about the end of their captivity. But with the house of Israel, as I say, it was slightly different. Their captivity is still ongoing now. Now, obviously, the people who were taken into captivity by the Assyrians are no longer alive, but to Yehovah's reckoning, the house of Israel are still in captivity. Why? Because his reckoning of who the house of Israel are his chosen. So if you are one of his chosen, then you are in captivity in the land of his and your enemies. And he will gather us from those lands. The house of Judah, as I say, they came back after 70 years. They dwell in the land, and you can point to the people that we would know as the Jews in the land of Israel, from whom Yehovah will take his chosen again. So some will be the natural branches, and some will be the Gentiles, those who are afar off, and altogether both will come and become the body of Messiah. In Jeremiah 30:10-11 it says, "And you do not fear, O Yaakov my servant, declares Yehovah, nor be discouraged, O Yisrael, for look, I am saving you from afar, and your seed from the land of their captivity. And Yaakov shall return and have rest and be at ease, with no one to trouble him. For I am with you, declares Yehovah, to save you, though I make a complete end of all Gentiles where I have scattered you. Yet I do not make a complete end of you." So the Gentiles, the end that will come to the Gentiles will not come to those among the Gentiles who are Israel, who are his chosen. Just as, national disaster might come upon the Jews, but he will not completely destroy all of the house of Judah. He knows those who are his among both groups of people, and ultimately they will both together be Israel in the new covenant. In Acts 2:36-39 it says, "Therefore let all the house of Israel know for certain that Elohim has made this Yeshua, whom you crucified, both Master and Messiah." So something that confuses people is the use of the term the house of Israel. Sometimes that is talking about just the 10 northern tribes, but here we see these people addressed. We know who it was that crucified the Messiah. It was the house of Judah, and yet they are referred to as the house of Israel here. So sometimes it's the 10 northern tribes, and sometimes it's just a term for Israel in general. Because what's it talking about in those cases? The house of the man Israel. The man Israel, his household includes Judah, which is why they are spoken of here as the house of Israel. And having heard this, they were pierced to the heart. They said to Peter and the rest of the apostles, "Men, brothers, what shall we do?" And Peter said to them, "Repent, and let each one of you be baptized in the name of Yeshua Messiah for the forgiveness of sins, and you shall receive the gift of the Holy or set-apart Spirit. For the promise is to you and to your children, and to all who are far off, as many as Yahovah our Elohim shall call." So we see what you need to do to be a part of Israel, whether you are genetically descended from the man or not, is repent and be baptized. Bring yourself in accordance with the word, be baptized, have your conscience cleansed, and then walk in the newness of life. That is how you become Israel. And it is said to them here, the promise is to you and your children, and he's talking to the house of Judah at the time, and to all who are far off. In Acts 2, we actually see that there were men of many nations who were gathered there. So those people who were gathered to worship Yahovah and to walk in his ways, they were always said to be a part of Israel. If you look at Isaiah 56, for example, it talks of the Gentiles who enter into covenant with Yahovah. But this giving of the Spirit was significant, because the house of Judah had the Spirit of God, but to them it would be a strange thing for Gentiles to receive the Spirit of God. We see in Acts 10, it says, "While Peter was still speaking these words, the Holy or set-apart Spirit fell upon all those hearing the word. And those of the circumcision, that is, the Jews, who believed were astonished, as many as came with Peter, because the gift of the Holy or set-apart Spirit had been poured out on the Gentiles also." So when they saw that the Gentiles received the Spirit, this was something that was significant to them. I imagine a part of what makes Judah jealous when they see that the gift of the Spirit is not only given to those that they think are Israel, those who are descended from the man Israel, but also on all of the nations. So you can imagine that it was quite a significant thing that Paul is explaining to the Romans when he is explaining that it's those who are chosen who are significant to Elohim. Elohim hasn't cast off those who are Israel by the flesh, but it's just like with the Gentiles. People will be chosen from among them who are given to Yahovah, if you like. So for all of the nations of the world, be they physical descendants or not, it all comes down to this matter of do you obey Yahovah, then do you receive the Spirit as a result of that? If so, then you are part of Israel. In Yahovah's eyes, men come up with all sorts of distinctions, saying, well, this group of people are Israel and these people aren't. But none of that has any importance at all to us. It's all about who does Yahovah count as Israel. You see all of these ideas being worked out in the New Covenant writings. But it would have been much more significant to people back then, to Gentiles, to explain to them, no, it's not, someone is not a Jew who is so outwardly, but one who is so inwardly, who has the circumcision of the heart. That's what really matters. We read these things, we can kind of become a little bit confused about what's going on there, what is meant by these phrases. But to those people, it would have been very significant. No, you can be a part of Israel. Doesn't matter whether or not you are of the circumcision, that is, the Jewish people, whether you were circumcised at birth. None of those things matter. What matters is your heart circumcised before Yahovah? That's what truly makes you Israel. So Paul was explaining these things to Gentiles, to whom it would have been very significant. Also to people who were Jews at the time, who would have thought, or who largely thought, that just being Israel by the flesh was enough to make you the Israel of God. Paul explains to those people as well, actually, you may have fallen. Israel's fall was to bring the Gentiles into covenant with Yahovah. So to all of the people of the time, it would have been very significant what we're reading of here. Less so to us, because we've kind of got the idea of, well, you can become part of the church. And then after we've got the idea of being part of the church, then we come to a reckoning of all of these things. So it was already accepted by us as just true that you could become a believer in Messiah. And afterwards we've started to learn all of these nuances. To those people, though, it was very much different to that. Whether or not you could become a part of Israel, whether or not you could believe in the Messiah of the God of Israel, wasn't something that they just accepted as the way that things are. So this is what this teaching is to convey to them, the teaching of Paul. In Galatians 3:26 to 29, it says, "For you are all sons of Elohim through belief or faith in Messiah Yeshua. For as many of you as were baptized into Messiah have put on Messiah. There is not Jew or Greek, there is not slave nor free, there is not male or female, for you are all one in Messiah Yeshua. And if you are of Messiah, then you are seed of Abraham and heirs according to promise. So what Paul is explaining here is, don't think of, well, the Jews are one group of people, the Gentiles are another. All who come to Yahovah to enter into covenant with him, all who have been baptized into Messiah, who walk in Messiah, all of them then are part of the body of Messiah. All of them are then Israel, and all of them are descendants of Abraham, spiritually speaking. They are the people whom Abraham brought forth into the world. It took a little while to get there. Israel had to become a nation, then they had to be disobedient, be scattered amongst the other nations, in order for all of those nations to come and be one in Messiah. So again, this would have been quite revolutionary, what Paul is saying here. All of us can be sons of Elohim through belief. It's not about whether or not you were born a Jew, or whether or not you're one of the 10 tribes of Israel who were scattered amongst the Gentiles. That's not what it's about. It's about, are you in Messiah? Are you Israel, seed of Abraham, in Yahovah's sight? Ephesians 2:11-18 says, "Therefore remember that you, once Gentiles in the flesh, who are called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, made in the flesh by hands." So that's what they would have called the Gentiles, the people who were Israel according to the flesh. They were known as the circumcision. They called the nations the uncircumcision, because just like today, they had an unhealthy focus on genealogy, thinking that that was what was important, and that you need to be brought in by whatever religious procedures they had to become Jewish, or whatever. Paul is saying here, you used to be Gentiles. You were called the uncircumcision by those who thought that blood or genealogy was what made you Israel. That at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation and without Elohim in the world. So you were Gentiles at a time in the past. You were excluded from the citizenship of Israel. Now, however, we're not, because now we have Messiah. Now we are part of the covenants of promise. Again, it's explaining to people exactly what Israel is, that you can enter in by belief, by faith. So it doesn't matter whether you are of genetic Israel or not. If you are not part of genetic Israel, that doesn't make you a Gentile. You are a Gentile if you are without Messiah in the world, if you are without God in the world. but you can become a part of Israel when you come to a knowledge of Messiah, and you become a part of the body of Messiah. But now in Messiah Yeshua, you who were far off, okay, have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. So people were far off from God, but now they've been brought near to God by the blood of Messiah. They have become Israel. It doesn't matter what genealogy they are of. There is no Jew, there is no Gentile in Messiah. Now all are Israel, whether they're Jewish or Gentiles originally, doesn't matter. They all become one. They are all Israel. Verse 14 says, "For he is our peace, who has made both one, and having broken down the partition of the barrier." So they had a barrier that went around the temple that was known as the Soreg, and those who were not genetically Israel were not allowed to go into the temple. These are the rules of man, of course. This isn't anything that you find in the Torah. This refers to the fact that Messiah, through his blood, has destroyed that barrier. There is no difference between Jew and Gentile anymore. Verse 15 says, "Having abolished in his flesh the enmity, the law of commands in dogma." Dogma is man-made law. So he abolished in his flesh the enmity, the law of the commands in dogma, and they certainly had dogma which said that the Jews and the Gentiles could not worship Elohim together, so as to create in himself one new man from the two, thus making peace. So the Jews and the Gentiles were distinct previously, but now those who are of faith come together into one new man. The Jews and the Gentiles are still distinct genetically, but when you take from each group those who are of belief, they are mixed together into Israel. That is the deciding factor, whether or not you are of faith or whether or not you are of belief. And to completely restore to favor both of them unto Elohim in one body, the body of Messiah, through the cross, having destroyed the enmity by it. And having come, he brought as good news, or as the gospel, peace to you who were far off, and peace to those near. Because through him, we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. So Israel, the body of Messiah, have the Spirit of God. And we are spoken of as a temple. Each of us individually are a temple of the Ruach, and corporately as Israel, we are a temple of the Spirit. We'll see, we'll go on now to the end of Ephesians 2, which explains that the Jews and the Gentiles have come together to make a temple. Verse 19 says, "So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but fellow citizens with the saints, or set apart ones, or holy ones, and and members of the household of Elohim. So we were Gentiles in time past. Now, though, we're no longer strangers and foreigners to Israel, having been built upon the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Yeshua Messiah himself being chief cornerstone, in whom all the building being joined together grows into a holy or set apart dwelling place in Yehovah, that is a temple, in whom you also are being built together, a dwelling of Elohim in the Spirit. So those who were in time past Gentiles who have come to be a part of Israel are built. Yeshua is the chief cornerstone. There's a foundation upon which the temple is built, which is the apostles and the prophets, and then the temple is built upon them. Notice that it says here, in the Spirit. This is important. It was the Spirit that showed Judah that the Gentiles had been brought into covenant, and that Elohim was working through them, so as the house of Judah would ultimately, at some point in the future, be made jealous of the Gentiles, and they would come and be a part of the covenant as well. It's been happening since back in Paul's day. It'll happen right into the future. But this idea of a holy or set apart dwelling place, that is a temple, this is something that had been prophesied going all the way back in the scriptures. We can find it in the Tanakh, in the book of Zechariah, for example. It says, "And he called to me and spoke to me, saying, See, those who go toward the land of the north have abandoned my spirit in the land of the north. The word of Yehovah came to me, saying, Receive the gift from the exiles," name some of them, "and you shall take the silver and gold, make a crown, and set it on the head of Yehoshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest, and shall speak to him, saying, Thus said Yehovah Sabaoth, See, the man whose name is the branch," this refers to Yeshua, "from his place he shall branch out, and he shall build the temple of Yehovah." Okay, so Yeshua is going to build the temple of Yehovah, and we've seen how he does that. The elect from Judah and from the Gentiles who have become the house of Israel come together in one man as a temple. It is he who is going to build the temple of Yehovah. It is he who is going to bear the splendor, and he shall sit and rule on his throne, and shall be a priest on his throne, and the counsel of peace shall be between them both. While the crown is for remembrance in the temple of Yehovah to Chelem, and to Toviah, and to Yediah, and to Chain, son of Zephaniah. And those who are far away shall come and build the temple of Yehovah, and they shall know that Yehovah Sabaoth has sent me to you. And this shall be if you diligently obey the voice of Yehovah your Elohim. So I imagine the people would have thought that this was a prophecy of the Messiah building an actual physical temple. But we have seen through the other scriptures, like what we saw in Ephesians, that actually the temple is built in the Spirit. Those who are far off the Gentiles came and built the temple, and will come and build the temple of Yahovah, with also those who are near, i.e. those who are near to Yahovah, his people, to whom were given the law and the oracles of God, the house of Judah, the what we might think of as the Jewish people nowadays. Okay, among those people and among the Gentiles, you are going to have the chosen, and it is the chosen who are the temple of Yahovah, who have his Spirit in them. It is by his Spirit that these things are done. His temple, where his Spirit dwells, will be built by all of the people of the earth, those to whom he is called, and those who respond to the calling. We see in Ezekiel 37, 5-6, it always kind of stuck out to me what this was talking about. I put this in the King James Version, as this is what a lot of people will be familiar with. It says, "Thus saith the Lord God unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and ye shall live. And I lay sinews upon you, bring up flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and ye shall live. And ye shall know that I am the Lord." So this is the prophecy that people might be familiar with as the dry bones prophecy, what the video is ultimately all about. It says in the King James Version, I will cause breath to enter into you, which is a possible translation, but we see that the word I will cause breath is actually ruach. Now, ruach can mean breath, but we would probably be more familiar with ruach being translated as spirit. And when we see him bringing those who are far off to build the body of Messiah, the temple of the Ruach, the temple of the Spirit, this makes more sense to us, that those who are dry bones, that don't have any spirit in them, will be given spirit by Yahovah, and that's what will bring them to life. Ezekiel 37, 1-8 actually says, "The hand of Yahovah was upon me, and took me out by the Spirit of Yahovah, and set me down in the midst of the valley, and it was filled with bones. And he made me pass among them all around, and see, there were very many on the surface of the valley, and see, they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, would these bones live? And I said, O Master Yahovah, you know. Again he said to me, Prophesy to these bones, and you shall say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of Yahovah. Thus said the Master Yahovah to these bones, See, I'm bringing into you a spirit, and you shall live. Better than bringing into you a breath, although you could translate it like that. We can see more clearly what is being said, and we have a proper understanding. And I shall put sinews on you, and bring flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put a spirit in you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am Yehovah. And I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied there was a noise, and there was a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to bone. And I looked and saw sinews and flesh came upon them, and skin covered them, but there was no spirit in them. So what we have there is quite a clear picture of something that was dead, life being brought to it by the Spirit. Very much like us as the body of Messiah, walking in the newness of life, because of the Spirit of God. The Word of God comes from the Spirit of God, and it is by doing the Word of God that we are reborn, that life comes to what was previously dead. So this is what was prophesied by Ezekiel long ago, which after Messiah we began to see the fulfillment of, starting in the book of Acts, when we see the Spirit being given to the Gentiles and to those who would repent and be baptized, to anyone who would do that, because they then become Israel. So what we're seeing in Ezekiel 37 isn't just life being brought to those who are genetically Israel. It is the revivification of that which was dead, becoming the body of Messiah, becoming this temple of the Ruach. In verse 9 it says, "He then said to me, prophesy to the Spirit, prophesy, Son of Man, and you shall say to the Spirit, thus said the Master Yehovah, come from the four winds, O Spirit, and breathe on these slain, so that they live. And I prophesied as he commanded me, and the Spirit came into them, and they lived and stood upon their feet, a very great army. And he said to me, Son of man, these bones are all the house of Israel." Again, that's speaking of Israel as a whole, not the northern tribes. "See, they say, our bones are dry, our expectancy has perished. We ourselves have been cut off." If you think back to Ephesians 2, those without God were said to have no expectancy. These bones, when the Spirit comes to them, their expectancy is revived within them. When we come to Messiah, when we repent and are baptized and we receive the Spirit, we then have an expectancy. These dry bones are cut off, they have no expectancy. Ezekiel 37:12-14 says, "Therefore prophesy, and you shall say to them, thus said the Master Yehovah, see, O my people, I am opening your graves, and shall bring you up from your graves, and shall bring you into the land of Israel," as talking, of course, of the resurrection. And you shall know that I am Yehovah when I open your graves, O my people, and bring you up from your graves. And I shall put my spirit in you, and you shall live. And I shall settle you in your own land, and you shall know that I, Yehovah, have spoken, and I have done it, declares Yehovah. So Yehovah will take a people for himself from the earth, and they will be Israel, whether or not they live in the land of Israel, whether or not they were descended from the man Israel. He will take from his descendants and from the Gentiles who have been blessed by his descendants being scattered amongst them. He will take of them, and they will go to dwell in the land of Israel. And he will raise people from their graves. He will raise them into spiritual bodies, and they will go in to be Israel in the land. Verse 15 says, And the word of Yehovah came to me, saying, And you, son of man, take a stick for yourself, and write on it, for Yehudah, for Judah and the children of Israel, his companions. And then take another stick and write on it for Yosef, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel, his companions. Then bring them together for yourself into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. And when the children of your people speak to you, saying, Won't you show us what you mean by these? Say to them, Thus said the Master Yehovah, See, I am taking the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his companions, and I shall give them unto him with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand. And just like people reading Zechariah's prophecy would have thought that the prophecy was talking about a physical temple, no doubt people have thought that this is talking about the actual house of Israel. When Ezekiel prophesied this, the house of Israel would be something known to the people who have been taken into the land of their enemies. Maybe they would have thought this was talking about, well, I will actually bring back those who are genetically the house of Israel. But just like the temple in Zechariah, those far off coming to build it is actually talking about those who would become the house of Israel, those who are submitted to Yehovah, who would enter into a covenant with him by belief. The people who were reading this would have no way of knowing that that was the case. The stick of Joseph is Ephraim, which is another name for the house of Israel. But again, they've been taken into the nations, assimilated into the nations. He's not going to bring back those people, because you would have to go back in time for that to be possible. The people he is going to make one with the house of Judah are those who are Israel by faith, and they will become one. One people, Jew, Gentile, will be one in Messiah as Israel. And the sticks on which you shall write shall be in your hand before their eyes. Verse 21 says, And speak to them, thus said the Master Yehovah, See, I am taking the children of Israel from among the Gentiles, wherever they have gone, and shall gather them from all around, and I shall bring them into their land. So, reading this, you might get the impression that the house of Israel are an objective thing which exists among the Gentiles. It's not what it's saying. The chosen among the Gentiles are the house of Israel. They're not distinct in any way other than their belief in Messiah. They're being part of the body of Messiah. So when they become the house of Israel, then they can be gathered from among the Gentiles. But they weren't genetically the house of Israel before that. They become so by virtue of the fact that Yahovah knew that they would come to faith and they would obey him. Verse 22 says, "And I shall make them one nation in the land, on the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king over them all. And let them no longer be two nations, and let them no longer be divided into two kingdoms. The king who shall be king over them when they're in the land, of course, is Yeshua. And they shall no longer defile themselves with their idols, nor with their disgusting matters, nor with any of their transgressions. And I shall save them from all their dwelling places in which they have sinned. And I shall cleanse them, and they shall be my people, and I be their Elohim." So this is what all of history was leading to. All of the terrible things that have happened, people turning away from Yahovah, all of that is leading to this point where those who, by faith in him, come into covenant with him and are made one people, and he will be Elohim of those people. Not like the first time he brought the people into the land, because those people were not true to his covenant. They didn't do their side of the bargain, if you like. They kind of ignored his instructions, but there will be this people group in the future, Yah willing, we will be among them, who will be Israel by faith. And there will be some of the house of Judah genetically, the natural branches. Some will be, some of them will be a part of Israel, but not by genetics, by the fact that they are true to Yahovah, that they are truly Israel in his sight. Verse 24 says, "While David my servant is king over them," speaking of course of Yeshua, who is a son of David, being of his lineage, "and they shall all have one shepherd, and walk in my justices, and guard my laws, and shall do them. And they shall dwell in the land that I have given to Jacob my servant, where your fathers dwelt, and they shall dwell in it, they and their children, and their children's children forever. And my servant David shall be their prince forever. And I shall make a covenant of peace with them, and the everlasting covenant it is with them, and I shall place them and increase them, and shall place my set apart place or holy place in their midst forever," speaking again of his temple. "My dwelling place shall be over them, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people." They will come together, and they will actually be his dwelling place also in the Spirit. And the Gentiles shall know that I, Yahovah, am setting Israel apart, when my holy or set apart place is in the midst forever. So at that point, Jerusalem is spoken of as being a light to the Gentiles in an actual, more physical way. It will actually be a place that acts as a light to the Gentiles on the earth. His people will have come together as Israel, as those who follow after him, and that will be like a beacon to the Gentiles. Read of that in Isaiah chapter 60. Jeremiah 31, 7-10 says, For thus said Yahovah, sing with gladness for Jacob, and shout among the chief of the nations. Cry out, give praise, and say, O Yahovah, save your people, the remnant of Israel, that is his chosen. See, I am bringing them from the land of the north, and shall gather them from the ends of the earth. Among them the blind and the lame, those with child and those in labour together. A great assembly returning here. With weeping they shall come, and with prayers I bring them. I shall make them walk by rivers of water in a straight way, in which they do not stumble. For I shall be a father to Israel and Ephraim. He is my firstborn. Hear the word of Yahovah, O Gentiles, and declare it in the isles afar off. It's that word that we saw at the beginning, which comes from the same verb root as rachok, and say, He who scattered Israel gathers him, and shall guard him as a shepherd his flock. So those who are far off are just as much a part of Jacob as those who are near. And Yahovah extends his grace to all people. And we see it's Jeremiah 31, wherein we read of this new covenant. Jeremiah prophesying, of course, to the house of Judah, kind of when Israel in the flesh had fallen away from Yahovah. Yahovah prophesied of a time when Israel would be faithful to him, when they would live in the land, and he would bring people from all over the world to be Israel, something that I don't think that the people who Jeremiah was speaking to, I don't think that they have any way or had any way to envision what Yahovah was actually talking about. We've got a bit of a better idea what that might be, but we probably still don't see it clearly. It says, See, the days are coming, declares Yahovah, that I shall sow the house of Israel and the house of Judah with the seed of man and the seed of beast. And it shall be that as I have watched over them, to pluck up and to break down and to throw down and to destroy and to afflict, so I shall watch over them to build up and to plant, declares Yahovah. In those days they shall no longer say, the fathers ate sour grapes, and the children's teeth are blunted. But each one shall die for his own crookedness or iniquity. Whoever eats sour grapes, his teeth shall be blunted. See, the days are coming, declares Jehovah, when I shall make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. Not like the covenant I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, my covenant which they broke, though I was a husband to them, declares Jehovah. Jehovah was faithful, but they didn't do their part. For this is the covenant I shall make with the house of Israel after those days, declares Jehovah. I shall put my Torah in their inward parts, and write it on their hearts, and I shall be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. And no longer shall they teach each one his neighbor, and each one his brother, saying, Know Yehovah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them, declares Yehovah. And I shall forgive their crookedness, and remember their sin no more. And this is not saying that people will come to a supernatural knowledge of who Yehovah is, and they won't require people to teach the scriptures. What it's saying is, you won't have people giving their own little take on who Yehovah is, saying, Know Yehovah, because his scriptures declare who he is, and his people will know who he is from his word. See, back then, you would have people teaching their own pet doctrines and their own idea of who Yehovah is, teaching people, saying, Know Yehovah, this is who he is. This is just prophesying of a time when his people would be able to come to him and not have these kind of charlatans who were trying to teach their own version of who Yehovah is, like the false prophets who would come to them and say, Peace, peace, when there is no peace. Now we all have access to his word to know who he is. We're not reliant on prophets coming into town and telling us the things that we want to know about Yehovah, the things that we would like to hear. His people will all know who he is. And this is the new covenant, when he will make with the house of Judah, the natural branches. He will take from them his chosen, and he will take from those who are afar off, the Gentiles, us. He will take us to be one new man in Messiah, in faith, to be Israel, and we will dwell in the land that is coming at the resurrection. Yehovah willing, I'll see you next week.